Morning. Good morning, good morning. Welcome to the West Valley Center for Spiritual Living, and thank you for joining us and helping us to create community in this beautiful way that our advanced minds that have been so divinely graced to figure out such new configurations for gathering in such a way that we have this privilege to join together on a Sunday morning. I wish I could see you. I miss not seeing you. You know what I was just thinking? This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. See, that would make me happy if we could be here singing and I'd be prancing down the aisle in my little high heels, but well, we'll make this work. And that's kind of what my talk's about today. The title of my message this morning is, it escapes me. You are never alone. Interesting, I felt alone there for a minute. So as we prepare to dive into a very timely and a bit controversial message this morning, probably not really controversial, just a little juicy. I think we should begin with prayer because it's going to help ground me because, I just sang publicly and it's being recorded and now I need to beg for forgiveness. So let's just go to that place of prayer and take a sweet moment, even though we're laughing and joking and teasing. Right in the center of laughter is God. That infinite presence of that which created all things. And so I know all the wisdom, all the love, all the guidance, everything we need to help us feel joined as a community, to come together and remember this is the day the Lord has made, and we rejoice in our togetherness. I bless this time, and I speak a special word of blessing for all my beautiful friends who are listening and new people who are visiting for the first time. I just know that this is a great day, and we make it great by our willingness to be together. So I say thank you, God. I let it be, and so it is. I feeling frisky or acting frisky. I don't know what it is, but indeed the title of the message is "You Are Never Alone," and it's always it continues to be so intriguing to me. The way the talk titles that were selected so long ago, yet within that guideline, that framework of opening to the divine wisdom, we now come into each week with a potential title to speak to what's happening immediately in front of us, what's going on in the world, and more important, what's going on in our lives in the way that we are dealing with what's going on in the world. So there couldn't possibly be anything more important than for us to recall that we are never alone, because we're sometimes feeling a little lonely in the way that we've been called to be isolated. I had an email from my beautiful friend Reverend Noli this week, and Reverend Noli was talking to me about how beautiful it is that some people are beginning to say, let's not use the term social distancing, let's call it physical distancing, because we need to be socially connected. And that really is, she didn't know that was the point of my message when she sent me the email, but certainly that is the entire point of what I want to bring home today and help us to feel a little more connected and to be enabled to feel empowered to reach out to each other in new ways and sense that heart-to-heart connection even as we are not close to each other in the old familiar ways. We know that we need each other. In fact, all the new science tells us that we are hardwired for connection. And I think that it's so interesting that we're isolated in the way that we've been asked to live, mandated to live for a while, and that throughout history, you can see a pattern of isolation as the way people have been punished. So in a tribal way, a bad person might be, or troublesome, they weren't necessarily bad, but they were maybe the edgy thinkers of the day, would be removed from the tribe and cast out. Even in current day, we have prisons that take people who have broken laws or shown themselves to be rebellious in some ways, they have been removed from the general population and placed into a prison population. And then if they continue to be unruly in any way, the punishment gets even harsher in terms of isolation. We have this thing they call solitary confinement, and we've all seen it in the movies. Hopefully not too many of us have had to experience it in that sort of format. But let's even look at religious history in the way that you could be excommunicated from a church. You could be disfellowshipped. Even to this day, people are punished by being removed and shunned by an organization, so that a whole congregation is not allowed to speak to you any longer. And then if I bring it to, even a little closer to home, the way we now punish our toddlers is no wooden spoons no longer are allowed, but we isolate them. We pull them away from whatever activity or family things that are going on, and we give them a timeout. And so now we find ourselves in this sort of mandated isolation, and it would be tempting to feel that we are being punished. So I want to bring that up today. I want us to really think about how that feels when we carry around that belief. And I want to remind all of our listeners and the people in our community that have studied this teaching, this philosophy for a while, we don't believe in a punishing God. We understand instead that there are these universal laws in place that require experience followed by a consequence or a reaction. There's action and reaction. We think a thought and we manifest something from the way that we had that thought. And that we're always demonstrating in our lives the way these spiritual principles work. So here we are, mandated and isolated one from the other for our own well-being, for our physical well-being, for our safety. And when I say it like that, it reminds me of the father that's about to punish the son, and he says, "Son, I'm doing this for your own good." It's like it's such one of those silly things, like it's going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you. Probably not. But I say that because I want to remind us that's not the kind of God that we believe in. That's something that humankind created, and that as we continue to evolve in our ideas, spiritually speaking, we hopefully will also evolve in our idea about what God is. Not so much a punishing God, but a loving, caring creator that has placed us in this universe where we see universal principles and natural laws in action, and we can learn how to live our life to be aligned to those principles rather than out of bounds and bouncing around and being and suffering because of consequences that we didn't necessarily have to experience. What's interesting to me is that right now, as we are experiencing this, almost for 4 months now, we've been looking at the impact of a virus, the tiniest thing imaginable, on all of humanity and the way that it's changed our lives. And so there are all these experts, there are researchers and trained people that are studying the virus itself. I read a great article just this past weekend in the Washington Post that talked about what they're learning from the cadavers now. It's kind of sad to think about, but that these researchers are diving deep and they're working quick and they're using this God-given ability to reason, the wisdom, the intelligence of the universe to look for a way to get on top of this effect we're experiencing from the virus. But what I want to add to that is that in this teaching we have a really clear statement of going back to cause, planting new seeds of possibility. So while it is wonderful that we have brilliant people working to understand the nature of the virus and our relationship with it, we also can have a level of confidence. If we look at the continuity of life, we can have a level of confidence when we stand in spiritual principle that there is a new cause that is emerging and that we will be realigning ourselves to a new way of life. We've got some practice now. For 4 months, we have been looking at new ways to stay connected, and that will continue as we wait for every day to unfold and see what else is new and what else we know and how else we can begin to live our lives and or be creative in the way we're living our lives in a smaller, what feels like a smaller container. I would remind you that it is not a smaller container. Our lives have not gotten smaller, even though we're feeling at times isolated or punished or bored or whatever our feelings are. And you are not alone. That's why it's valuable for us to remember that we are, as a humanity, as the race of humankind is moving through this experience, we're doing it together. We're doing it individually, and we are adding, as I said last week, we are spicing up our own story around it, but we are also doing it collectively, and we need each other. I selected the title of the talk from a subheading in a chapter of a book from Ernest Holmes. And in the chapter that, in the subheading, it's actually the talk title, You Are Not Alone. Dr. Holmes, the founder of this teaching, The Science of Mind, reminds us that our move through life it's not a solitary endeavor. That when we separate ourselves from life itself, we're disconnecting. And we want to be conscious of that, to not disconnect. Because when we do that, we're missing the bigger picture, the bigger reason, the bigger purpose for being here on the planet, and that is to begin to understand oneness and our glorious connection. So this is important information right now. I want to read to you a quote from that little chapter that I think is a perfect reminder for all of us. Very short and practical, I would say advice, but it's beautiful wisdom we need to be reminded of from time to time. And I would actually categorize it as good self-care. Listen to these words. Every day and every moment of every day, we are expressing in some way or another our faith, our beliefs, and our convictions. Our faith, our beliefs, our convictions, we want to be sure what those are. Because if we are not intentional, if we're not conscious and awake and choosing, noticing what level of faith we are responding to life from, then we could sink into the fear of the collective unconscious that's extra sensitive right now. I think it's a higher level of confusion that's going on in what Holmes would call the race consciousness or the collective unconscious. So we want to be as conscious as we can, and one of the ways we do that is by looking at our spiritual beliefs and convictions. Now, when I say that word conviction, it pulls me right to my own center. It actually makes me reflect on the very things that attracted me to living a dedicated spiritual life. Not on ministry, but on my personal ministry. You know, the way I live my life every day, the way I set intentions before my feet touch the floor in the morning. I give my blessings and appreciate my gratitude. I have this great gratitude for life itself. And then before I go to sleep at night, I practice my Emma Curtis Hopkins that every night of my life before I close my eyes in slumber, God swelling me with possibilities, I choose. So when we're talking about our conviction and our faith, remember that there's great choice in there. Imagine that to be true, that you're laying in bed at night and spirit itself is swelling you with possibilities, and that there's this plethora of choice. And that's our gift. But it's not only our gift to the world, it impacts how we show up, right? In the immediacy of that moment, but it impacts like the next day, and the energy, the vibrational frequency that we move through day by day. So every day and every moment of every day, let's look at that. Our faith, our beliefs, and our convictions. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to begin to ask ourselves some questions. You know, if we are never alone, if I am never alone, how do I then show up in a spirit of belonging to a community when I can't even come to church on Sunday and sit in a sanctuary? This is a meaty question, and it is time for us to be asking questions such as that. How can I demonstrate that I love my spiritual community, that I'm healed when I'm in spiritual community, that I'm inspired by being with other people? Because see, nobody has said we can't be together. We just have to be creative in the way that we are choosing our togetherness right now, in the way that we're remembering we're never alone. For example, writing this material, it caused me to ask myself, when was the last time you picked up a phone and called someone you love that maybe you haven't heard from in a while? You know, nobody needs to call you, but we can initiate contact with other people, and I think it might be one of the few ways that we can be of service to each other. Service is one of our spiritual practices. There's no getting around it. We are called to demonstrate in some ways our connection to each other. Our gift to humanity is our gift of service. And so, how long has it been since you've reached out, and how do you want to do that? I think that's a gorgeous assignment for all of us to look at this week as we're moving through this new week. What will I do this week? What will I do to inspire my own faith and conviction? How will I look at my own spiritual beliefs in a way that will enhance the expansion of what I understand spiritually? You know, because we want to remember as much as possible that though the world is changing, that everything is uncertain in the earthly, physical way, that there is something absolute, there is something solid and unchanging, there is a spiritual truth, a spiritual reality that is untouched by any of the events that are happening on this planet. Untouched, cannot waver from the way that it is constantly blessing us with this outpouring of good. That's what I want to remember. I also want to mention that I've had, this week especially, I'm not sure why, but I've had some concern for those people who are not watching on Facebook Live, that are missing this Sunday talk. I guess I know why that happened. This week, someone came to the center while I was here alone in the building working. And someone rang the doorbell, and I went out, and it was just one of us, you know, someone from the community that I love very much. And she said to me, when are we going to gather again? I haven't seen you do a Sunday service since we were last together in March. And I just was so surprised, you know. It doesn't occur to me how many people are disconnected from a regular weekly message. And that doesn't have to be. Even if you're challenged electronically and you don't really want to be more involved in a computer or a device, there are still ways that you probably already have, either on your phone or your Kindle or, you know, your tablet, some way that you could be still connected to this service. Because I talked to this woman and I said, well, you have an email address, so you must have some connection. And she said, yes, but I just I really don't do email. And I said, but how do you get there when you do check your email? And I was then able to talk her into understanding how simple it would be to go to the website and watch the YouTube version of this message. So I've done something that I think is absolutely incredible. I had a ministerial intern create a tutorial for Zoom, an absolute entry level basic, here's how you do it, how to get on Zoom. So even if somebody says to you, oh, well, you have to download the application, and that blows your mind, don't even worry about it. If you can get in any way to the internet, you can get to Zoom, and it's really simple. So first you got to get to our website, and I just submitted it this week to the board. So I don't know if it's uploaded yet. I don't know if it's available on the website, but it will be. If not today, it'll be there this week. I'm confident. And you can teach yourself how to use Zoom. Now, if you're listening, you probably don't need it, though I actually have to tell you, I learned some stuff watching the basic tutorial. I learned some important stuff that I needed to know. But there are people in your life that aren't using Zoom. We have 9 or 10 active groups every week that you could be taking part in. And in fact, I would say if you're not doing more than just watching on Sunday, you're really missing out on this amazing, just this vast list of possibilities of things you could be doing, from spiritual practice to classes, book studies, conversation circles. Oh my goodness, there's no end. You can even get on Thursday nights and just chat with the ministers. Reverend Clyde and I are making ourselves available, and I'm telling you, it's my funnest hour of the week. So tell the people you know who don't know that there's a tutorial now, and help them learn how to get online. Urge people to try and listen to the Sunday talks. Check in with each other, and maybe tell them, what's really cool now is you can tell them, you know what, Reverend Karen gave a great talk on this date. You need to just listen to that. Oh my gosh, I want you to listen to it so we can talk about it later. Lots of options, lots of ways for us to still join as a community, for us to join together socially and uplift each other spiritually. So think about ways you can do that. We still have each other, and we're still gathering if we choose to. It just looks different. When you get on Zoom, there's these great faces across everybody on the call. It has a face, and it feels, and they call that a room. You have joined the room, and it feels like you're really there. And I could talk more, but I want to get back to my material. Let's just reconsider how we want to show up, how we can deepen our faith, how we can reshape our conviction and recommit to our own spiritual path and help each other. The other thing I wanted to mention this morning is that, there's something valuable in staying open and alert. I actually want to use that word, alert, to spiritual guidance. There is spiritual guidance all around us all the time, but we have to be awake to recognize it. And so the other invitation I extend to you this morning is to be more alert, to be more open to the presence of God in your life, in all of your life. If there is no place that God is not, then imagine the way that Spirit shows up when you're peeling a potato, or taking the dog out for a walk, or getting your groceries. I notice that I really need to look for God at the grocery store. I'm still challenged by the whole mask and everybody seems to be covered and hidden, and I feel more separated from human beings, and that hurts my heart. So I have to really look. Sometimes I'm thinking, I don't even want to look in people's eyes because I don't want to see all the ways we're masking ourselves from each other, and because that hurts my heart. But I want to stay connected to people, not just people I love, but the people that share this grocery store experience with me, because God's everywhere. But what would happen if we all got more intentional in our being alert to the presence of God wherever we are? I'd like to say that I think things would change radically and quickly. You know what? One of the things we've lost in the way that God speaks to us. This is really so ironic, but few of us, or fewer and fewer of us, are being spoken to by the Word of God, because we've sort of thrown the Bible in another direction. And I don't know that that's all bad. I had to get away from my Bible for a while before I could return to it and begin to see it through a broader vision, a metaphysical and more personal application without all the religiosity around it. But what I believe we're witnessing is that people are drawn to be more spiritual and less religious. And that's why we've seen the decline in the numbers of church attendance. It's not that people aren't looking and craving for that spiritual connection. It's that people became disillusioned. People, as we got more information, we began to see that we weren't happy in rigid beliefs that excluded others who had different lifestyles than our own. You know, that everybody should believe just the way we do. And then more and more people woke up and said, but that doesn't really fit with what I believe anymore. You know, there are other ways we can connect. And so I want to say that I love that we teach metaphysical Bible in New Thought. In fact, we have a Bible class going on. One of our classes going on right now is Mark Reed, who's a great person to help you understand the metaphors in the Bible. But if we look at the Bible, the way it was written, what it is, I mean, if we just started with what it is, I think this is mind-boggling that most people don't realize it's not a book. People think it's a book, and even some religious people, even when I was a Bible student, I believed it was a book to be read cover to cover. And then as I got more wisdom and more interested in what was in there for me, I began to see and studied. I took some classes, and I began to see that it's not a book. It's more like a library. It's got a lot of books in it, and some of them have historical content, and some of them are poetic, some of them are verse. There are stories and parables and letters that have been preserved and then combined, and yes, they've been rewritten and sort of changed in cultural ways. But if you just look at those ideas that were preserved thousands, some of them thousands of years ago, there's great wisdom in it. One of the reasons that the Bible or other sacred books or sacred literature, one of the reasons it sticks around and it never loses its value is because we have this confidence that we can be fed from these sacred. We put the sacredness in it. We do that, not religion. We do that. So the Bible itself, if we could be open-minded enough to look at it this way, we would understand that the content in the Bible, even in the days when it was just first being collected and put together, it was radically progressive for the times. And then we could see that there are parts of it that are still radically progressive for times that are changing. And here's why. Because the overall theme of the Bible, and probably we could say this of any sacred work, any work that's considered divinely inspired, that these works are always calling humanity forward into a better future. Think about that. We're always being called forward into a better future. So there's some divine guidance in our lives right now. You don't have to go to the Bible to seek it out because it's everywhere present, but it's calling us forward, and that's a way in which we want to stay alert to the presence of God, to the guidance, that divine guidance. I want to speak for a moment about the Hebrew people that are written in great detail the stories of their lives and the historical content of the beginning of Judaism as it prepared for the coming of Jesus, and it sort of transforms into Christianity. Judaism stays solid and others branch off. But the Hebrew people, from the very beginning, from the book of Genesis through the book of Deuteronomy, that means Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, all the Pentateuch, as the Jewish faith calls it, it has this intricate history of a people that were moving through challenging times. And so they're just doing the best they can under difficult conditions. They're in slavery in Egypt, and Moses comes up and says, hey, come on, let's get out of here. And then there's this drama and then a bunch of people follow, and then they get out into the wilderness, and then years pass, and there's no promised land, and they get discouraged, and they begin to lose their faith, and they begin to mess up. They begin to make decisions that aren't necessarily good. Any of that sound familiar? That's kind of the life we lead again and again. And they demonstrated it to us. It's recorded in the Bible again and again. People mess up. They lose their way. Their faith is diminished. And then there's some consequence. And in the Bible, it was often that punitive, that punishing God of the Old Testament, Jehovah would, the wrath of God would come down, and they would be punished. And then those who survived the punishment would realize that they had done wrong, and they would repent, and they would come back. But here's the repetitive part of the story that I want you to really hear, is that there's always a turnaround. They always get another chance. There's a statement I stumbled on when I was doing my research this week. There's a statement in the Bible that's repeated quite a few times that says, so this or that happened, and then the people cried out. The people cried out. Yeah, we know biblically, there was wailing and gnashing of teeth. There was fear and confusion. Sometimes their languages were confused. There was anger. There were bad things that happened, and people were crying out. Right now, somewhere on this planet, people are crying out. People are confused and frustrated or frightened or angry. Worldwide, there are people that right now are crying out, wailing and maybe even gnashing their teeth together, right? Maybe some of us are gritting our teeth in our sleep a little more than we used to because it's stressful on the planet right now. And I would say that some of that is because we're more aware than we used to be. Technology has given us that gift, and some of the times it's not a gift. But we're more aware of the disparities on this planet, and we are in a position where we have developed a stronger sense of sort of the anguish of witnessing injustice. And so we're crying out. And what I want to say is that it's important for us to see that crying out in that universal way we're crying out now, it's a prayer request. It's a way we are calling out to our God. And when we put out a request to God, God answers. When we put a demand on the universal laws of this creative medium of the universe, and we align ourselves to what we know could be, and we put our demand on the law in that type of a firmness of belief, not using our strong will to fix something that's broken, but a firmness of belief, we are tapping into the creative force of the universe, and we are thereby instigating change in our own way. The only question is, are we able to receive? I think there's a way that we cry out, that we, in our own modern way, you might say. We're not trekking through a desert for 40 years with little food, and I don't know, maybe we are. Symbolically, I guess we are. but what I know is that one of the ways that we cry out is when we get so overwhelmed by whatever it is we're feeling, and we become aware that we can feel it. I don't mean just that way we get stressed or angry, but that you begin to feel it in your body and you pick your head up. What is that instinct to pick your head up and look Godward, as Emma Curtis Hopkins would say? We look Godward and we say, why? Lord, why? And I want to point out yet again, it's so much better when I'm standing and we're here together in the sanctuary, but that posture is a way that we open ourselves, that we are releasing. Notice that when we open, why? We are opening and we are releasing what we have been holding inside, and we are now a vessel to receive. We become a container. So it's vital that we recognize our crying out, our frustration, our wailing, our sadness is all a part of how we are opening ourselves to be more compassionate, but more importantly than that, to be able to receive the answer to the prayer. You know, you can drop a prayer request in the prayer box, and I promise you the answer is delivered probably before anybody even starts praying for you, because you have opened yourself to receive it. But in the same way, we then are tempted to forget that we gave it to God, and then we carry the burden. We take it, we pick it up, and we take it back again. So think about this. Everybody is doing their own crying out right now in different ways. We are not alone in that. And because there's some kind of crazy togetherness about that idea, what that says to me is that even the people that are diametrically opposed to my views, or I'm opposed to their views, even though there appears to be this disparity of thought, we are all doing the same thing. We are all stomping our foot down, putting our demand on the law, saying there has to be a better way. And as we ask, it is given. So can we allow ourselves to be good receivers as we reconfigure the way we're thinking about everything right now? I wanted to close this morning with this gorgeous quotation I found in a book that has inspired me quite often in the last 5 years probably. Neil Donald Walsh, who's written many great books, but this one I read, I don't know, 5 or 6 or more years ago. It was published in 2011. The name of the book is The Storm Before the Calm. And he wrote the book speaking to us about the way we are on the cusp of this global change. And I would say it was so sweet to stumble on this reading this week, because now we're right in the middle of it, and everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. I don't have to teach you about it. You already know that. So I want you to listen to these words of wisdom that this wonderful, God-centered person wrote for us. This is not the end of history or the death of modern society, but it is the birthing of a new civilization. Now is not the time to hoard food, to run to your cave. It is time to get in the game, not get out of it. This is not a survival game. It is a creation game. This is not a revolution on the ground. It is a revolution in our minds. And then he ends it by saying, we will weather this. I love those words. I mean, I want to be reminded of that. I want to be reminded of that frequently. We're not victims. You know, we are people who have been gathered in a new configuration to do the work that needs to be done, even though it appears we are isolated. We are not disconnected. We are not alone. Dr. Holmes, in that same chapter, We Are Not Alone, said that we must learn to deal with the outward facts, but we should never cut ourselves off from divine inspiration. So I think it's time for us to be divinely inspired right now. If you'll just join me for a moment, we'll turn within. We'll take a moment to just allow the words here today, the ideas, to just float around this virtual room that we share, knowing that there's a gem, some truth in what has been spoken this morning, some way we are calling out, some prayer request we are now ready to receive. There is no place where God is not, so I know that right where we are, each one of us individually is exactly where we have been called to be this morning. And therefore, the infinite intelligence of the divine is blessing us. That we sit in the recognition of the love of God, this great force of the universe that created us, that sustains us, that guides us and directs us. And in this very moment, we are aware, even more succinctly than ever before, we are aware of our connection, not only to God, but this day to community. As we sit in calendar days, a day after Independence Day, we recognize the way we are freed to think independently and to align ourselves again to our faith, our beliefs, and our convictions. Those beautiful ideas that sustain this planet and bless us personally and collectively. I know that there is a healing going on even as I speak these words of prayer, that there is an intelligence we are igniting within our own being, so that whatever ails us, any little things in our bodies that have not been functioning at the highest vibrancy that we would like, I know that we are encouraging that flow, that law of circulation within our physical being, so that we can be vibrant and vital in our expression of health again. And I know that we are blessing our relationships. I tap into this idea that even those long distance relationships that have looked disconnected, even if there has not been an exchange of words, that we are still connected at the heart. That love is, as a force in this universe, that which allows us to forgive each other, to realize that we are not isolated and we do not need to punish ourselves any longer by believing in that ability to be removed from the presence of each other. So as we stand in that grace of God, as we stand in that realization of our oneness and our connection to all of life, we are reconnected in a sweet and divine way to each other, and we are healed. And this impacts every part of our lives. We know that it's our relationships, it is our finances, it is our health, and it is the way we experience a relationship with the divine, in the way that we open to that guidance, in the way that we recognize the beauty and the strength and the profound joy in this universe, and we accept it as ours. And so I say, thank you, God. Thank you, Infinite Spirit. How wonderful it is to know that these universal laws are always working on our behalf. I release the words of this prayer so we can just allow them to be. And together we say, and so it is. Amen, amen, amen. Whew. Well, there you go. That's something. I have my offering, and thank you so much for continuing to support this center. I'm going to pass mine to put it in the collection plate this morning, and I know that you are doing your part in keeping us in this position where we can do this. Thank you for sharing your tithes. Check out our website, look for the Zoom call, the survey results. Thank you for participating in the survey. Interesting that your responses are very useful and will help us plan our re-entry. We won't be doing that in July, but I'll keep you informed. We'll be looking at what's going on locally and watching numbers and listening to governors and all of that stuff so that we can make it safe and easy for everybody. I love you. Namaste. Until next week.